Okay, so I'm going to try setting up the RAID controller in the BIOS. Now I have a sneaking suspicion that this isn't going to work in Linux. Most of the documentation I've looked at is all about Windows drivers and installing the Windows drivers in order to get the RST configuration working and stuff like that. So I suspect that when I create a RAID volume here and then attempt to install Linux, Linux won't recognise the disk. But we'll give it a go. So easy RAID. RAID must be enabled first. Reboot needed when succeeded. Yeah, reboot. Oh, right. So that's an epic fail before I even start. So if we go along to peripherals again. Oh, this is interesting. Because we've switched on the RAID, we now have some additional things at the bottom that weren't here before. Let's try going in here. No disks connected to the system. Okay. So let's go and have a look at this. Oh, right, okay. So we probably need to change these to RST controlled and RST controlled so that the Intel RAID stuff can pick up the disks. So if we've done that, let's go back. We might need to restart, so let's do that. If you remember me talking about the CSM support previously, I'm reasonably sure even, that I need to disable this for the RAID to work. So that's what I'm going to do now. So this is the easy RAID. If I click on the PCIe, I'm going to want RAID 1 because essentially what I'm trying to do is mirror the disks so that my operating system survives a SD card failure, particularly because the OS is also going to contain quite a lot of configuration information and probably the operating systems for one or two virtual machines running on it. So I really want to preserve it, and I don't want to lose all the data if something untoward happens. So we'll try the proceed. RAID volume is... Oh, okay. Okay, right. I'm not entirely sure how I tell at this point. Should we go into here and see what it says? Okay, so we have a RAID volume, and essentially, as I said, that's a mirror of the two 500GB SSDs in the computer. So my next step will be to create a Fedora 30 server bootable USB, which we should do shortly. So we'll just go and find Fedora server, like so. That's quite amusing. So we're just going to download the standard and we'll save the file. And off it goes. And we'll cut back when it's actually finished downloading. So I'm going to be using Rufus to create a bootable USB. It's just easy to do in Windows. So we pick the not there. Press yeah. Okay. Just find the ISO. Format options. That all looks pretty reasonable to me. Yeah, I'm probably not going to read that. Okay, so I've read it. Yeah, whatever. Yes, just do it. And I imagine by the magic of television, this process will go a lot quicker in the video than it does in real life. And we're done. Let's just check it. It's there. So let's see what happens when we boot off this pen stick. So let's just install it. We don't need to test the media. Okay, so obviously we're going to have English, proper English. Let's do this. Okay, so this is basically doing what I thought it might do, which is it hasn't identified the RAID configuration that I've set up in the BIOS. I rather suspect that this is because the Intel RST system isn't supported by Linux. And it doesn't need to. It doesn't really need to be because Linux has its own software RAID. I'd kind of hoped that the BIOS would do a bit more than it does in terms of that, but it doesn't. So we will go back into the BIOS and delete the RAID configuration that we have created, and then we'll see what happens when we boot off the disk again. So if we go back into peripherals, easy RAID, Okay. Oh right, okay. So if we just delete, yes. Okay. So we go back into peripherals. Oh, the only what we need to do in here. Just change these back to not RST controlled so that they're available for other systems. And we'll save and exit. And we'll boot off the and install. This time we're actually going to pick proper English because we can and because we are. And go to disk installation. This time we can see that it's picked up the disks because they're not being claimed by Intel. So we'll tick both of them. And I'm going to pick custom because we want to do some fancy stuff. Okay, we'll leave that. So we press a little plus. The mount point we need to pick. First one is boot, so the next mount point will be swap, and the last mount point we're going to do is root, which is that one. So just to confirm, we've got a boot drive of 250 megabytes or thereabouts. We've got a swap drive of about 15 gigabytes. And the root drive is about 450. I might just change this to 18 because if it lets me. Okay. Okay. So there we go, we've got plenty of swap space, I think. So if we go to done, passphrase. Okay. So in terms of passphrases, the best policy is long. So I'm obviously not going to tell you what my password is. I'm not going to tell you what my passphrase is, and I'm probably going to mute the keyboard tapping just in case you're autistic and decide you can work out what it is. There's a little warning at the bottom here telling me about keyboard layouts. This is why you probably shouldn't use any of the characters that move around on keyboards, just on the off chance that the keyboard layout is a bit weird at this point. But you can always change the passphrase later if you need to. So that's done. Press done. Tells you everything it's going to be doing, accept changes. So I'm not entirely sure why this hasn't worked. Let's just delete them all and try again. Well, let's click on that and see what happens. Well, that's easier. Okay, so the boot drive we're going to leave. Oh no, we're not going to leave it. We're going to change it to a RAID. To RAID 1, which is fine. I didn't realise it needed an EFI boot. I guess it does because it's an EFI boot drive. And again, I'm not going to encrypt it because it's something that the computer needs to see as it starts up. Now the root drive, we're going to RAID it once more, RAID 1, and this time we are going to encrypt it. And XFS is fine because it is. So we're going to pick swap and we're going to RAID that, and I am going to encrypt that as well. And the encryption I'm using is Lux 2, which is the new version of the standard sort of Linux encryption. As far as I'm aware, it works. I guess if it doesn't, I'll lose all my data. Okay, so one final check through because I don't want to have to keep doing this. So the boot drive, it's given it 1 GB of space. It's RAID 1, which means it's mirrored. It's not encrypted, and the partition is ext4. The EFI, it's given it 200 megabytes. It's RAIDed. It's not encrypted, and apparently there's a EFI system partition format, which I've never heard of before. So the root drive is RAID 1 again, so mirrored. It's encrypted and it uses the XFS file system and Lux 2 encryption. The swap drive is a swap drive, so that's the file system. Again RAID 1 and again encrypted. So we press done. So we accept the changes and we're ready to go. So that's all done. Network and host name. Oh, we can do that while we're here as well. So here's the host name at the bottom here. And I'm just going to call it Shinon. There you go. Apply. That saves me changing it later. And again, none of the Ethernets are set up. I will have to sort that out in a minute. Done. So let's begin installation and see what happens. So I am going to set the root password. Again, this may get cut so you can't see what I'm typing or hear what I'm typing. I'm also going to take the opportunity to lock the root account. I can't think of a reason off the top of my head immediately why I'd want anyone logging in as root on my server. So disabled. On the user creation front, I shall create a user. And it'll just be that. This will be the administrator account, and the password, I need to think of the password. It's going to take me a while to remember that password. We can see along the bottom that it's practically finished already. So we'll just have to wait for that. In the meantime, I'm going to write down that password, and I know I shouldn't. Okay, so we're done. We can press the reboot button, and with any luck, we'll boot into the operating system. So there you can see it's now asking for the passphrase, and I can't remember it. No, got it. So we can log in. And we're in. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to check to make sure the structure of the drives is as I expect it. And there we can see that there are there are 4 RAID partitions, which is what you want. And there is 2 encrypted partitions, essentially, which are mirrored, obviously. Pretty much as expected. Quite happy with that. So next thing I'm going to do is just check what the IP address is. Oh, well, that's interesting. I don't appear to have an IP address. Well, my little switch on the desktop is flashing up saying it's connected to something, but we don't appear to have an IP address at this end. Well, that's going to be fun to sort out, isn't it? We try plugging into the other network port. Well, the port's lit up as I'd expect it to. So from a hardware point of view, the switch is talking to the interface. Let's just do another IP config. No, bugger all. Interesting. So I managed to find a USB to Ethernet adapter, which obviously has been knocking around for a while. So hopefully Linux recognises it. Let's find out. Oh, I can't see it there. Let's try. Oh, we've got an IP address there, look. So you can see the second one down, ENP0S20 blah blah blah, IP address 192.168.105. That'll do me. I'm not particularly bothered. I'm going to do the thing that I should have done in the first place, which is update. So sudo dnf update. And my password is what? Yes, of course. So the purpose of doing the update is hopefully that might fix the issue with the network. As far as I can work out, network card drivers haven't really changed much in like the last 10 years. And while these are kind of a new model, that I can't imagine they need different drivers. Now, Fedora 30, when I stuck it on a laptop, did have problems with the network, which hopefully have been resolved since. I'm grasping at straws a little bit, but it's always worth updating first. Update first, ask questions later. Well, that's pretty impressive. We'll try ifconfig again. Okay, that makes sense. Right, so I rather suspect that a restart and maybe plugging in the network port would be quite useful. So I shall do that momentarily. Before I do anything drastic, I thought I'd check the network status. If I can remember how to do it, nm CLI connection show should list all the connections. It does. Interestingly, you can see that the two onboard Ethernets, EN02 and ENP3S0, are there, but they're not active. So I'm probably going to try to make one active first. Let's try nm CLI space up ID EN02. All right. Oh yes, I forgot the connection bit. nm CLI connection up ID EN02. Oh Christ, okay, so it says device has no carrier, so that's the other network connection. Let's try the other one. ENP3S0. Oh, right, apparently that's now active. If we just do an if config again, and I can see that ENP3SO now has an IP address. So in theory at least, I now have the internet working on the computer. Awesome. So just to confirm that it's going to work, I've disconnected the network cable from the USB thingamajig, and we can see that no longer has an IP address, but ENP3S0 does, and helpfully it's actually got the IP address that I want it to use. And just to prove that it is working, I'm just going to run the update again. So it's sudo dnf update, and just to make sure it goes off to the network, and it does. That makes me absurdly happy. So I thought I'd just reboot it and make sure that the network was still available, and it isn't. So the next thing I'll have to do is to go into the interface. How do I do that? Let me think. ENP3S0. Cool. Go to IPv4. if we do a describe, available properties, DNS search, I don't think that helps. So we just go back, because it's not in there I want. Maybe I'll just type it here. Set connection dot auto connect. How are we done? Oh, is it quit then? No, I don't. I do want to save it. So do we save? Yes. And now if we quit, if config, you never know, it might have actually done what it's supposed to have done. Well, it hasn't, but we can bring the network back up. NMCLI connection up ID ENP 3S0 config. So it's back up. So we'll do a restart and we'll see where we are at that point. So whoopee-doo. I've restarted, run if config, and I now have a network connection upon startup. This is very good news. Okay, one final thing to do to make me happy with the networking, and that's to go into my switch, thus, and add a reservation for the IP address. And this is purely in order to make sure that, as this is going to be a server, that I always have the same IP. And that's the IP it's got at the moment, so, and it happens to be a nice round number, which we like, so we will save that. And we'll press OK. The next time I reboot the server, it'll go through. Job done.